Well, whoa. Do you see the record thing to the right of your, to the left of your name is a record button?
I hit it and it's recording.
Okay, cool.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm muting you again. Okay, so I hope everyone has a glass of wine and some chocolate like I do, and let's get started. And if you all want to take a break around the 1 hour point, let me know, and we can have a 5-10 minute and then regroup and then do a little more and have some questions. Okay. So, what is and is not and why PR? So it's not a magic bullet. First of all, I'm going to address some sort of stereotypes and then move from there. It's not an end-all be-all. It's something that you have to incorporate into your daily studio practice or your weekly studio practice. You have to determine how much time you have to give to it. And no matter how much or how little time you have in your studio practice, I think public relations is absolutely essential. And public relations isn't always a huge, giant campaign. And we'll get into this a little later about when you do a big campaign and when you do a big push for something. But public relations is as simple as adding, like I have recently started to do, 3 contacts to your Rolodex per week. That's my new goal for myself. If I have a contact that is a really high-level contact, like Tony Carmen and I are talking about some things and have sort of secured a different new level of relationship in the past few weeks, then that one quote-unquote more important contact can take the place of the 3. Or maybe some weeks you'll add 12 and then the next week you don't add any. And that's what I mean by approaching this holistically. So it can be something as simple, a small goal that I think is very realistic. Everyone could set it when they leave this seminar. I'm going to add 1 new contact a week. Well, heck, you've already done that in your Artist-Works seminar, right? And each new crop of Klein-Artist-Works artists should become part of your Rolodex. So that's, and again, like I said, I'm going to jump around. So just kind of open your mind to what I'm saying and let it all merge like Jell-O, later in the fridge. So it's not a one-time event, and it's not automatic, meaning that what you do every day should be part of your public relations, but not necessarily everything you do is public relations, although I think it can be. For instance, and we'll talk about Facebook and social media through this whole thing, but when you're on Facebook, for instance, and this is something I really want to drive home tonight, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, anything that you're using a lot, Flickr, all these things you should be using to some degree. But the ones that you use the most, those should be your daily or weekly opportunities to drive home your message. I hope everyone had an opportunity to read the article that I sent, because I'm going to talk about a lot of things that were in that article, including time. Who has time for all of this? And the answer is everyone. It's just a matter of figuring out how much and allocating it and deciding what type of public relations you want to do. I'll talk about myself a lot in that regard as well, and I'll bring up other artists who I think do a good job and who get a lot of publicity. I think I have more publicity than exhibitions. So, a few pages of it. And it's just because I think about it all the time. To me, and here's another thing to figure out for you, in figuring out what type of publicity you want to do, and there's all types. But for me, getting publicity is like when I used to be a reporter. I would see my name in the newspaper or a byline, and you're gone the next day. There's always a new headline. Well, you're gone in maybe an hour or 2 now, right? So to me, there's this big thrill, sometimes even more than an exhibition, of getting publicity. Next point. Publicity is only a communication tool. It's not, like I said, a magic bullet, and it's not the end-all be-all of your studio practice. You could get a great review or terrible review, or just a couple of listings, or whatever. You could get all of these things, and like I said, by the end of the week, or by the end of the next day, other people have all of those things as well. So we'll touch on this too, maximizing your publicity and how to incorporate what you do get and really work the heck out of it and use it to get you even more publicity later. More than anything, public relations is and like we've talked about a lot in Klein-Artist-Works, it's a method to build relationships. And that's one of the most important things. People are sort of terrified of journalists, which I understand, or bloggers, or anybody that has the ability to give you public acknowledgement. Those people are scary. And especially when they're behind a wall of a glossy magazine cover or a newspaper. Those things still have a lot of power and hold a lot of sway for us. But they're just like me and you. It's just their job to do what they do. So when you're at your job, how do you want to be treated? And that's the only way you have to think about journalists, really. In addition to figuring out how to pitch to them, but that's another story. But journalists they're not scary. They're not people to be afraid of. It's just figuring out what makes them work. And if you're the type of person like I am to look around and observe trends, what's happening not only in the media, but in popular culture, in your own work, sort of themes and trends that are happening, and themes and trends that individual writers write about, and that specific publications publish about. And when I say these are blanket terms. I'm using old media terms for all media, okay? So when I say publish and I say writer and I say magazine, I also mean blog, newspaper, anything, any format, podcast, any of that stuff, okay? So if you think about them all in the same branch of communication, there's just different ways to exploit each offshoot on the branch. Then you can start figuring out how to capitalize and maximize or exploit, whatever word you want to use, each individual line off of that branch. Okay, so I hope also don't get overwhelmed by any of it. It's super easy. You just have to break it down into small little pieces. It's like Reese's Pieces. You have a few, and then suddenly you ate the whole bag. It's basically the same thing, piece by piece. Karen, I know you're laughing at that right now. I'm sure you are. So if everyone read the article in the Reader, and if you didn't, send me a note, and I'll send you the link while we're talking. Read it later, though. Don't try to read it now. They brought up this idea of, and it's not new, but they're talking about the information pipeline. You are part of the information pipeline, whether you know it or not, every day. Whether you are bringing in what you're bringing into the studio, what you're bringing into yourself, and then what you're turning around and putting back out again. And I know everybody here is on Facebook. So boom, you're automatically part of the input and intake of that pipeline system, okay? Your job in doing your own public relations, or hiring somebody to do it, is to filter that pipeline. If you become a successful filter to the pipeline, both what you're putting out and what you're taking in, you will have a tremendous success rate in public relations. This is probably as close to a bullet, a magic bullet, that you're ever going to get with public relations. Because things change so quickly, it's your job not necessarily to keep up with the changes, Like, you don't have to necessarily be on Twitter. You don't have to necessarily be on, you know, each specific platform. But if you're able to keep up with trends and you're able to filter things that come through the pipeline, you'll be able to build an excellent database of contacts, which I know a few of you are concerned about, how to build your mailing list. And you'll be able to pitch yourself to specific reporters and or editors with a higher success rate. And that sounds really scary, but it's not, and it's actually a lot of fun, especially if you enjoy talking to people. So I'm going to get to that in a little bit when we get more into the nitty-gritty of how to do all of it. Hold on, I'm reviewing my notes.
Lauren, could you repeat that magic bullet?
Yeah. Oh, I can hear you. Why can I hear you?
Please, I just put myself on mute, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, so it's not that I'll ramble about magic bullet for a minute, and hopefully I'll repeat what I just said. It's not a magic bullet, but if you are, but as close to one as you will get is by paying attention to trends that are happening culturally, artistically, and mostly because writers are the editors of these trends. Basically, I think just about everything is happening all the time, but we get to this thing called the zeitgeist when someone or a group of someone picks up on it. You know, the one thing I really love to bring up is the submarine was invented by 8 different people around the world at the same exact time, and none of them knew each other, and none of them had contact with each other. I think this happens, this goes on all the time. Somebody gets an idea, somebody else is having the same idea somewhere, and on and on and on. And it's sort of the old saying of it's not who got there first, but who got there best. So your job to be a successful publicist for yourself is to edit and filter the pipeline. What pertains to you? You do not have to take in all this crap that's coming at you all the time. That's what gets to seem overwhelming. For instance, I'm not on Twitter. It doesn't work for me. It's not a platform that works for me. There are ways to connect those platforms. There's a painter, Steven Assael in Arkansas. He exploits every possible media source in every possible way. I'm friends with him. He is the most introverted, shy, scared person in person that you would ever meet. But his online presence is huge. He went on Instagram, which is it's for iPhones. It's a photo sharing thing. You've probably seen it on the Facebook feed. Facebook just bought it, so everyone will probably have access to it soon. He went from not even knowing what Instagram was until I told him to 2 weeks later he had 2,000 followers on Instagram. Whoa. But he doesn't go to the bars. He lives in the middle of nowhere, Arkansas. He has 7 kids, and he paints, you know, almost all day, every day. So in between the hot dog sessions with the kids, he's posting a photo that relates to his work. And here's how it relates to his work. He has his own children in his paintings. He has his wife, who is a midwife, also in the paintings. And sometimes he features himself. And he also teaches. Those 4 things right there give him nearly infinite amounts of photos to take and upload onto Instagram. What's going on in his classroom? What's going on with the kids around the dinner table? Which seems not interesting, but if you have 7 homeschooled kids in the middle of Arkansas with an artist and a midwife for a mom and dad, and they're poor, they wind up doing really creative things. And then he puts filters on the photos, he uploads those photos, and they become a secondary work of art, a secondary artwork that he's putting out for public consumption. So in his own very introverted, not intentional way, because he doesn't set out to do it, I don't think he even knows he's like Mr. Publicity. because, like I said, everything you do can be looked at as a type of publicity, then he winds up constantly generating his own news source. In that article that I sent, it said that Lexus, the car manufacturer, is rivaling Condé Nast Traveler in terms of what it puts out for vacation destinations. That might seem like nothing to an average reader, but that's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. And it indicates a lot of where we are and where we're going as a society and as consumers of information. We no longer look toward, and we've known this for a while, but we don't just go to the Chicago Tribune or the Sun-Times anymore, right? But this idea that the people that there's, the fewer news organizations there are, the more you can trust them, right? But now we're all becoming that way. And so here's my other point that I want to push towards you. I see very few people and very few artists doing this successfully. And this gets back to the idea of my last webinar about specialization. Everyone knows me as the bug lady. For a while, I was kind of conflicted about this because as artists, we want to be able to run around and do all kinds of things, right? We want to try this over here and try that over there, blah, blah, blah. I do those things. You wouldn't necessarily know that from my Facebook page, but I do. You wouldn't necessarily know it when I engage with people, because what I do, since I didn't set out to become known as the bug lady, but it's an identity that makes a lot of sense. It's an identity that works. And it's not one that I'm likely to leave, since I've been doing it for a very, very long time in different ways. And it's just the way that I tell a story. So, and everyone can do this. It's just a matter of figuring out how. Publicly, I'm always the bug lady. And then, I let in a few other things. There are other creatures that I'm interested in, and there's some art articles that I will post. But generally, Naturalia, that goes towards the arachnid or the insectoid world, is what you'll find from me. People post things that wind up on my page, delete it, or I'll block them or whatever, because this is my news feed. This is my public persona. I do not post what I have for lunch. I don't, even if I want to, and sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm so excited, I just had this awesome sandwich, stuff like that. It doesn't fit. It's not part of the story. It's not part of the narrative. It's not part of what people can reduce down, okay? So as horrible as it sounds, the thing that sells is being able to push yourself down into a news bite. And you can do that, and there's nothing wrong with it. And when you do it, and you have someone's attention, then you can open up your story into the larger narrative arc. So you start, and I'll use me, like I said, as an example, because I get a lot of publicity, and I know how to do it, right? So you start with this one little thing. I'm the bug lady. I'm obsessed with beetles. And you can change by degrees in your artwork, in what you propose to people for stories. You become a sort of maximized 2D version of yourself almost. Something that can be a little brightly colored, something that is unusual in any way. And so I start with the bugs, because everybody hates bugs, right? But there's unusual parts of what everybody does, or everybody's personal story. And there's the other thing. So we'll just get back to touch back on that idea of being the trusted source. My page now on Facebook, for example, and I get emails like this too. I wake up to text messages, emails, and Facebook posts of people saying, "What's this bug? Do you know what this is? Have you seen this? Do you know this story? I saw a bug in the street today and thought of you." I have 1,600 people that every single time they see a bug, they think of me. That's public relations right there. And it's because of the insects. Now, because I have this unusual passion for insects, and it took me a while to realize it was unusual. I kind of thought everybody else was crazy for not liking them. But now I've accepted that I'm the weirdo. Fine. I'll exploit the weirdo. That's totally fine. And then once people get in, they realize I'm not that weird. They're afraid of bugs, but they can look at my drawings, okay? And then we can start having other conversations. So the impetus for the artist is to, I want to give you everything. I want to show you everything. There's all this stuff going on. Look at what I have over here, and then this thing, and then this, and then this, right? People can't take it all in. Can you take it all in? No, you can't. That's what leads to overwhelm. And that's why everyone is here tonight, because you realize you want to do this, but you're overwhelmed by it. Dial it down. Dial yourself down. Find the thing. And I can help you find the thing, because everybody's got one. But find the thing that makes you most unique, interesting, whatever it is. But that makes you the expert. I don't have an entomology degree, but everybody thinks I do because of how much research I do on insects, right? So maybe you have something that seems relatively boring. Here's an example. Troy Kleiber, he is a lawyer at the Art Institute, and he does some law work for other artists, sort of like reviewed contracts and stuff, but mostly he works at the Art Institute. You can find him on Facebook. He's a super nice guy. K-L-Y-B-E-R. He has a article in the Art Institute members newsletter that comes out every month, and he also writes the crossword or something like that. So he's not an artist, but he's found he has this passion for words and weird research, and he's turned it into a column and a crossword. And then he gets to engage with a whole bunch of artists on a level that he otherwise would not as a lawyer. Because we don't seek out lawyers to talk to them unless we're in trouble, right? We don't generally sit around talking to lawyers about stuff. But he is engaged with the artistic community on this level. So he's primarily a lawyer. His interest and specification is in law, but he has these other, well, one weird thing like writing an art crossword that's unique. And then doing the column where he finds something in the archives that we don't really know about. That's your job. What's in your archives that we don't know about, that the public doesn't know about? And how do you spin an interesting yarn? And it's not something that you can do overnight. And what can feel very terrifying when you're thinking about public relations is, I have to do this all right now. You don't at all. It's better to put out quality over quantity. And we'll get to it in a second. It's better to put out small bits of information around things like group shows. This relates to your question, Ken. And do big pushes for solo shows. That makes sense, but then there's all these areas that can be confusing, like collaborations and things like that. I'll talk about that in a minute. Patricia, did I answer your question?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, that was great.
Okay, good. Okay. Hold on, let me look at my notes. Oh, okay. I came up with this last night. I'm very proud of this. Write this down. This is very exciting. You can get very like, oh gosh, what am I supposed to Oh, yeah, you've got a good point about Facebook. Okay, sorry, Amy just sent me a note. We're going to get, Amy, I'm going to get to social media in just a minute and address that specifically. So hold tight. And if I don't answer that question, make sure I do. The thing to write down, all right. And this relates to social media as well. As an artist, as a person, There's a romantic version of yourself, and then there's the reality. Your job is to figure out where those two places meet. And that's what you want to push. So no one could relate to me if I was only the bug woman, right? Not really. I mean, I'd turn into like a sideshow freak. So I do allow myself every once in a while to have the tangential rants, but that's just part of my personality. If you came over to my apartment, I'd do the same thing. I think I'm pretty much how I am in life on Facebook. I just really edit what I post. So Twitter, anywhere, I just edit what I post. I have other things that people know about me. Tattoos, the nieces and nephews are part of my life, so I bring them in on occasion, but I relate it to my studio practice. What am I teaching the kids about bugs? What am I teaching the kids about science? We dug up dead birds, or we found a dead bird, we buried it, we're going to dig it up, that sort of thing. Because that relates to this very clear studio artistic persona that I have. And I say persona not in sort of any sort of artificial way, but we do have studio personas. You're concerned about different things when you're with your husband or your best friend or whatever than you are in your studio. Those studio concerns are always there. I urge you to now bring publicity for the studio concerns into that as well. And it's easy to turn on. So, but we'll keep going. So, the romantic version of yourself and the reality. The reality is, like for instance, last year, Paul knows a little bit about this. I had a hugely successful PR business right out of the box, and I did it part-time for a little while, and then when I did it full-time, it took over my life, and it was exciting and wonderful, and I've made more money than I've ever made last year when people weren't making any money at all, and so it was very exciting, but working 60, 70 hours a week while also dealing with overwhelming grief nearly killed me. So that's one reason I don't take on individual clients anymore. But I have information that I want to give you guys, so that's why I'm doing this. Now, I did let the grief come in to Facebook a little bit, and if you find some interviews with me, the grief is very, very, very overwhelmingly there. And if I look back at some of my other posts, I might be a little embarrassed about some of them because I was probably a little too emo sometimes. But I made a conscious decision to let the grief be part of my public persona, partially because there was no way around it in the studio. That's what I was working from. It's what I'm still working from, but it doesn't eat me alive anymore. What has replaced the grief now in my public persona is my artistic relationship with my new fiance. So it just sort of happened that those things switched, but now I've made a conscious decision. And I make a conscious decision about what I post in relation to those things. And I just had a group of 14 people come over, and they were very interested in how, you know, I keep my studio at home. It's basically the entire living room. How do two artists live together and keep the peace and all that kind of stuff. So that may be something that developed. But our sort of romantic art exploits without making people sick is my goal there. Okay. All right. People are asking me about Facebook, so I'm gonna go there. The thing that I want to stress most with public relations, apply this to your Facebook page, is consistency. I have a lot of subscribers now and friend requests coming in all the time because people can count on me for a consistent news feed. I really believe this is the reason why. I think there's evidence for this in the fact that when I post things that aren't related to what I normally post, people don't know how to respond. It's like when I do drawings of people, everybody's like, what? I don't know what that is. So I do those things. I just don't necessarily put them out for the world, and that's okay. When you start inviting the media actively into your life, they look at your Facebook page. And being friends with the media on Facebook is a good idea. Now, some people are saying, but I'm friends with family, I'm friends with whatever, and it doesn't relate to the studio. But in fact, it does. Because even if you're a hobbyist, even if you're not doing this professionally, but I believe all of you are, or at least want to be, and that's why you're here, your studio is your job. And if you're not making money hand over fist, if you're not whatever, it doesn't matter. It's still your vocation. It's what you do. Are any of you going to quit? No, you're not going to quit. So it does relate to your family. It does relate to your life. And Victoria, for instance, you're interested in political issues, and that totally ties into recycled materials and all those sorts of things. So what are you interested in the world, and where does it meet with your studio practice? Where does the romantic version of yourself, which can be anything, the political crusader, the echo warrior, the whatever it is you're into, right? So whatever it is that's in the background influencing you in your studio, because it's there, no matter what it is. Money, it doesn't matter what it is. Where does that meet with the actual studio practice? And then you can use that as an opportunity to inform people. I'm friends with a lot of NPR reporters and a lot of different journalists, bloggers on my Facebook page. But I never, ever, 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 ever approach them on Facebook. But I am in their view and in their conscience somewhere, because they see my posts and the posts are consistent. Media looks for expertise. Media will gravitate towards the strongest example of whatever it is. Whatever it is, the strongest voice, the strongest whatever. And I've gotten, publicity just through bizarre opportunities as well, going out to the dunes, for instance. And here's a way to incorporate it into your daily life. I went to the dunes to do a bio blitz, which was a 24-hour National Geographic study and specimen count for the dunes. And while I was there, I happened to notice that there was a reporter. And he happened to wander over to our group that was going to go count a specific type of carrion beetle. And he got invited. Somehow he wound up coming with us. And so I hung back and I paid attention to what he was asking and what he was interested in before I made a statement. And I really listened to what he was asking, the lead scientist on the study. Because I'll admit, I'm sort of a media whore. I really like it. It's fun. I get excited. And when I figured out that I could make a pretty compelling statement about beetles being cooler and more exciting and more important to me than polar bears, which is that's a huge inflammatory statement, right? I'm basically dissing the polar bear, saying it's a better indicator of the ecological climate and state of our planet to assess beetles than polar bears, despite how fuzzy and cute they are. I said something to that effect. Well, he talked to people all afternoon, but because I took my time, formed what I was going to say, and said it in a very commanding voice, that's what got on the radio. Not the scientist who's been doing the study for 2 weeks, but me, who decided to make this comment that was very calculated and flippant at the same time. That's just my personality, though, right? I'm just giving you an example. I can do those sorts of things just because that's just my personality. I can walk into a room and say something really insane, and people, they'll go with it, I guess. So what can you do is is the question. Where is your expertise? Expertise meets romance, meets reality. And the reality and the expertise are really two of the same things. Did you get a degree in business? Did you, I don't know, live in a kibbutz? Like, what? There's so many interesting things about you. Everybody's concerned about art degrees and art credentials. Bah, it's bullocks. I think it's total bullshit. The thing that is most interesting and draws in the most people is what is really real. It's sort of a paradox that you have to be not real to get that attention, to bring the reality in. So the 2D version of myself, the Beetle lady, all this stuff, gets a lot of attention, and then I can turn around one day and get really pissed off at the political climate and admit to people publicly on Facebook that I'm a survivor of rape and all of these things, and people pay attention, right? So because I have a consistency of message, a consistency of vision, and a pretty consistent way in which I deliver it, I can every once in a while step further out on the branch and say something or do something that people don't expect. And then you have a whole new audience. You have a whole new group of people that want to hear what you're going to say about that thing. So I hope this makes sense. If you have at my, well, I'm getting a question. Okay. Gina, I'd like you to ask that question out loud. So I'm going to unmute you, okay? Gina, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, yeah, can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it sounds like what you're talking about is branding yourself, and that's your starting point. But I'm having a hard time figuring out how to brand myself, and you know, you have something really specific, the bugs, and that's, you know, representation. But I'm not exactly very often a representational artist, and you know, I'm doing abstraction, and I don't know how to really get to branding myself.
Perfect. I was waiting for somebody to ask this question. Good, good, good. I thought about it for days. I see behind you a map. I see some black and white image of perhaps a landscape. I can't really tell.
I think that's a calendar with a picture.
Yeah, it's a calendar, but what is the picture?
It's some, I don't even know what that is. It's like a commercial thing that somebody sent me, a calendar, and I just used it. I don't even look at it.
All right.
It's not about me, really.
Okay. Well, what I'm doing now, because take me around your house if you want. Put me into the room that's most used. Let me see is this your studio that you're sitting in?
No, no.
Okay.
Well,
no, I'm going to answer the question.
Okay.
Why do you have that map there?
Because I like to orient myself about the world and know where countries are and like that.
Okay. Does that have anything to do with your work?
Well, I'm interested in space and the physical world.
Mm-hmm. We're all interested in the physical world. Keep going. Be more specific.
How does the map relate to my artwork?
No, it's just the first thing I see. I also see lots of similar tones of aqua and green. So
this is really my husband's office more than mine.
Well, I'm just trying to get you to think, because I understand what you're saying, but it's there. So it's just a matter of going, okay, so you're interested in space. What about space? Like NASA? Like launching rockets to the moon? Or
no, spatial relationships, distances, the relationship of objects to the space, making your space interesting and configuring space, creating spaces.
Okay, so you're interested in interiority. Interiors?
Interior.
And I don't mean that like an interior decorator. I mean like...
Right, yeah. And exteriority, outdoor space.
So maybe how these things push in and push out and away from each other. Okay. Ooh, who's ringing? That's okay. Ooh, how do I get back to see Gina? Anyway, so what I do, that it's a specific representation, but it has a genesis. It has an origin point. What is your origin point?
My origin point for my work, you mean? Geez, that's a good question.
Yeah, ask these questions, and you don't have to answer it right now, but let me give you sort of a litany of questions to ask yourself to find this out. Okay, I spend a lot of time analyzing myself, so I can give the tiny 40-second version of what I do. Okay. And I've talked about this before, about having your elevator speech. And so since you've asked the question about branding, yeah, you basically want to have an elevator speech. If you get into the elevator with the gallerist of the gallery that you most want to show at in the whole entire world, and you don't have your iPad or you don't have whatever to show them, what's your elevator speech to make them interested? Lots of people can say, I'm interested in space. I'm interested in space too. That's why I cast shadows on some of my insects. I'm interested in how they exist in the world. I'm interested in how they interact with one another. All of these things can be considered space. And I will give you a book to read now if you want to jot it down. It's called The Poetics of Space. It's a seminal book from, I think, the late 60s. It is more than applicable today. And just from what you've said, I think you would probably really, really enjoy it. Everybody should read it. But it's about how our spaces live inside of us and how they come out again. So what did your very first home do to you? How did it shape you and form you and then take you on through the world? It has questions in there that may help you find your specificity. And you don't have to be so specific as to sound like a scientist. That's just naturally fits with my work a little bit more. But what you should be, in my opinion, looking for is a way to be specific enough to lure people in, and sort of like a great painting, specific, even an abstract one, right? You have something in there that's so specific that people want to look. But I was listening to something today by the creator of Nemo and Wall-E, and he said, you want to give people the 2 + 2 component. You don't want to give them 4. You want to give them something to put together. So you want to give them the number 2 and another number 2 and let them figure out that it makes 4 is the idea. So I could present 2 pieces of information to you. I grew up, and these are public pieces of information. I grew up in an abusive, violent home, and I went to an academic realist drawing boot camp. I basically went to school just like I grew up, and it results in very controlled drawing, right? That might be more personal stuff than you want to let out, and that's totally, totally fine. But specific words, specific ideas meeting abstract concepts. And that's already what you do in your work, probably. But how to pull it out further. And I know that a few people here do abstraction. So what is the genesis point? What is your origin story? We're very, very, very interested in that, especially in the West, or we wouldn't have so many people that are Christians and Catholics. We're very, very interested in origin and how the story
origin in terms of how you started as a person in the world as an artist, or
sorry, say that again, Gina. I'm sorry, I was reading a question.
You mean by origin point, like how it's personal? It sounds like you want to get personal. How we started in art, personally. What drew us in, or?
Not necessarily what drew you into doing art, but what makes you do what you do today? Why are you interested in space? Were you an architect?
Frustrated architect.
Aha! Aha! See? There you go. You don't have to say frustrated architect. And Ken, I read your story, or your question. I'll get to you in 1 second. You don't have to say frustrated architect. And everybody pay attention now. This isn't just about Gina. This is about all of us. What's the thing that is missing? What's the thing that you tried and failed? What's the thing that you didn't like? What's the thing that was there before and isn't there anymore? Or is it? We all got to where we are for a reason. Paul-Klein is an expert in this because he runs a school because he has how many years of experience doing art world stuff, right? He's an expert in so many insider things. Where were you an expert? You're frustrated? I don't even need to know why you're frustrated. It doesn't matter. How can you take that frustration and spin it into a story that people are going to want to hear? And I don't care how abstract you work. I really don't. I don't care how out in the clouds you are, or if you do 45 different media. What I am telling you, and I know this for a fact, you can't be namby-pamby. You can't have a, well, I do all these things, and it might be interesting to talk to as an artist, but I'm talking to you as an editor. I'm talking to you as somebody who edited for 10 years. If I was presented with a press release that was a bunch of words that led nowhere, you kind of have to provide a map. You have to provide the architecture for why someone's going to be interested in your story. Not everybody is gonna like ketchup. Some people want whole tomatoes. So, and this relates to editing the pipeline and building your contact list too. So, you don't have to answer this, but just sort of take a note now, everybody. What did I do last year? What did I do the year before that? And how about the year before that? Because everything I've done has led me to this point right here with you. You want my information because I have spent a number of years doing this very thing. And the more I do it, the more I learn that specific stories or specific story arcs are what get you attention. For whatever reason you were a frustrated architect, you can now turn around and exploit the architectural community because you already have an inroad there. I worked with survivors of sexual abuse for a long time. Nobody knows this about me now. I don't talk about it. It's not something that I push. But because I was a survivor of it, it automatically gave me an in that community. I didn't have to prove myself as an expert. And so you start, perhaps, with an industry magazine. Gina, sick to death of architecture, sick to death of this theory on whatever stupid architecture, like whatever it is that you were frustrated about, right? You can spin that frustration into a positive story. Frustration with architecture leads to these amazing drawings, paintings, this whole set of this new thinking, this new life. Does that make sense?
Almost.
You seem a little frustrated. I'm gonna put you on mute, and I'm gonna unmute Ken because I want him to say what he's talking about, and maybe he'll help answer your question. Okay? Hey, Ken, go ahead. Ken? Maybe he checked out.
I can see his mouth moving, but I can't hear him, so maybe he's not muted.
Them. Huh. Okay, Ken, we're having some technical difficulties. I'm going to continue because I've been asked to by a few people. to keep going through the rest of the points and then do questions later. We are already at 8. Twitter versus Facebook, how do you find contacts? All right. Does everybody understand how Facebook works? I'm going to sort of unmute everybody now. Does everybody understand how Facebook is working these days?
Yeah.
Well,
Kind of.
All right. I'm gonna run through a briefing of it. Okay. You know the news feed that happens on the side of everything on the right? Everybody can see everything that you do unless you have it specifically set for them to not be able to see it. So every comment that you make, everything that you post, winds up in that feed, okay? This is why I'm talking about specification. And for others concerned with it, you don't even necessarily have to look at a specification in your studio practice per se. But everyone here, regardless, is interested in very specific things. You might wake up one day and say, today I'm painting 12 small paintings in the color red. And all day long, you could make posts about what you discover in those color reds. Or this week, I'm going to tackle this specific project. And then keep your posts specific to that project. And here's what will happen. When you start being specific in your newsfeed, people will look to you as an expert, and people will keep in mind what you're doing. There's a man here in Chicago who's obsessed with dots. He posts pictures of dots in addition to his artwork, right? So this is his other obsession that he's got. People find pictures of dots and they post it on his wall. You want to create in the mind of people who follow you specificity. And that sounds like probably a terrifying word to abstractionists, maybe. But it's not. You're still working with a specific line. You're still working with a specific color. And you still have a specific idea in mind. Because when you don't achieve it, even if you're working in abstraction, you know it, right? You're not happy with it for the same reason that I wouldn't be happy with it. You didn't achieve what you wanted. So back to Facebook. In your feed, if you're posting these very specific things, like I'm trying to work out this problem in my studio this week. I'm trying to do this week. Here's 3 pictures from my notebook this morning. I'm going to tackle these projects this week. I'll keep you posted. Those sorts of things draw in other artists. Because when I see an artist that I like, for example, or a critic or somebody commenting on somebody else's story in that right-hand column, I click over to that person. When I am having conversations in a thread about something on somebody else's page, I pay attention to who's in that feed. And I try to find a few friends a week to follow or to make new friends. So I friend request people too. And it's totally okay to go cyber stalk them and figure out if that's a good person worth knowing. Oh, geez, he's got a really interesting couple of photos here, and he does this sort of work that I really like, or maybe he's into medical curiosities, or he's whatever. He lives in the same state. It doesn't matter. You can friend anybody for any reason, But you have to make that personal decision. I can't answer for you how do I deal with the fact that my grandmother and my mom is on my page. You either have to tell mom, deal with it, or like we've done with some family members, restrict their usage, restrict what they can see. You could make a new page for them, but that's a pain in the ass. Tell them that they either, and to be frank about it, they either need to deal with it, or you just restrict their feed and restrict what comments they can make. My mom is pulled in as part of it, but my mom's totally, we're like the same. We're 2 apples from the same tree for sure. I have very Christian fearful relatives that don't understand a lot of what I'm posting and think that some of it is totally like, I think my uncle told my cousin not to come visit me based on some of the stuff I posted on Facebook. But I'm not going to stop, because that's not the full picture of me. And your family should know that. So unless you have small kids, and if you do, then maybe you need to get rid of them. This is where you need to make the decision. Because if you start using your Facebook page to push your studio, you will get more friends, you will find more artists, you will make more connections. I've gotten a couple of shows, my fiance's gotten a couple of shows this year based on Facebook posts. So it's a real tool. And to get into that specific line of thinking helps, because people don't have to filter out the salad you had for lunch. Do you know what I mean? It's like mindless chatter in the background. Make yourself really, really focused in there. I've got some more questions. Okay. I feel like we've gotten off track a little bit. Oh, which media is better? There is no better media. If you read the article and it said that there was like a 0.2%, 0.02% response for marketing, it's true. I would never advise you to take out an ad. I would never advise you to pay for anything, especially advertising, which is marketing. Public relations is what you do for free. It's the kind of interactions that you can have and that you can control. The sort of interactions and responses, not responses, but the interactions that you have with people to a certain extent. If you decide to take out ads, there's just not a huge return rate on them. And especially not unless you're doing something retail oriented, like the ads on the side of Facebook. Those are, Paul would do well to have one of those, but the rest of you wouldn't, unless you're making production work and doing Etsy shops and stuff like that, and I don't think you are. So don't even worry about purchasing marketing stuff. It's vanity stuff. It's a way for magazines that are in trouble to fill their coffers. Don't worry about it. You will get more mileage out of pushing your own work on Facebook. And so what I do think are the top things, Reddit, get involved with Reddit. I'm not totally involved with them yet, but I think that if you spend 3 to 6 months reading something, you should be able to figure out how it works and who does what and why, and their contact information, which is what you want to do when you're reading anything. Oh, this is really interesting. Who wrote this? How do I get their email? Put it on your email list. And not necessarily just your mailing list, like, you can have 2 mailing lists, and I suggest it. People who are interested, buyers and stuff like that, you want a buyer's list and a collector's list. You don't necessarily want your well, no, you don't at all, really. You don't want your media contacts to overlap with your collectors, because those are 2 different audiences, and you should be speaking to them differently. So building your contact list, for instance, and building your Facebook page are essentially the same thing. You see someone who's posting something really interesting, like I know a lot of people think, well, I can't really friend that person until I know them. Send a friend request. And if you think they won't friend you, tell them why you're sending a friend request. I sent one to a man who we only had one friend in common, and I had no reason to be friends with him other than he looked like he did really weird performances, and I wanted to see those. And I'm not going to search him out on his website. I really won't. I won't remember his name, and I don't think I'm alone in this. So you know, there's interesting stuff going through your newsfeed all the time. Go mine your friends' pages. Come mine my page. You know, see some interesting artists, or see people that are posting interesting stuff. Send them a message. Hey, I'd like to be your Facebook friend, and here's why. And either they ignore you, and who cares if they do, but they'll probably say yes. And then just don't bomb them with crap, because then they'll block you. So, hold on, one other question. Victoria, okay, collectors and buyers list. You should be getting, all right, when you have a show at a gallery, there's lots of ways to find a collectors and buyers list. One, anybody who ever said, I'd like to own a piece of your work, but those people should be on your list. Because those people could say, I'd love to own this. They could say it for a number of reasons. Either they really like you and they don't really like the work, so they're being nice, but maybe one day they will like the work. And this is what I mean about building relationships. The same with reporters. They might not like what you're doing now. They might not have room for what you're doing now. It might not be on their agenda or the publication's agenda. Maybe the person who wants to buy your work is married to somebody who's a total asshole and they can't, but they'll get divorced one day, okay? So you're making a long list like that. And I've worked in plenty of galleries where that's the case. One of the spouses is putting the axe on the work, and as soon as those two split up, they come buy the work. So, and if you're with a gallery that is good for you, they should be willing to share that information with you. That doesn't mean that they're going to turn over their entire buyer's list or collector's list, because that would be foolish on their part. But people who have expressed interest in your work, reporters or buyers, they should be sharing that information with you. Or if they're not comfortable sharing it for whatever reason, one, I would ask them why. Because if you have a relationship with a gallery and they don't want to share their sales information with you, then what the hell are they doing? Like, why? You're supposed to all be in this together. And if they don't trust you enough, then, yeah, bleh. Find another gallery. There's plenty of them. Talk to your friends. There are people who are interested in similar works. And when you sold them, for instance, I work for a collector. And I know the type of work she's interested in, and I send her to shows that I think she will be interested in hopes that people who are now my friends will be selling work to her. So, one, ask people, who do you know that, do you know anybody that's in this kind of work? When you have an exhibition, are you contacting all of the people on your list? And don't trust that they are. Don't trust that the galleries are doing their jobs. They're probably not. So, for instance, when I signed on with Aaron Packer, I told him, I hope you know I'm going to be in there the first week of the show making phone calls. The people who have bought work that is similar to mine, they need to know me. And if I'm the one that has to call and make the introduction, I will call and make the introduction. And people who are buying work, they're not, it's okay. They're totally okay with that. If somebody says, I want to buy this piece of work, but I can't afford it, offer them a payment plan. I do that all the time. Paul does it, right? That's how the world works. That's how we afford things. And set up your own parameters and your own contract, your own automatic billing, whatever. Don't be afraid to do that stuff. So when you, and we all have friends. We'll have lots and lots and lots of friends. If one of us has had an interview, or one of us has had something happen, talk to that person. Find out why. Find out how. It might not occur to that friend to say anything to you. People tend to think that everyone around them is doing okay. So it's our job to speak up. It's our job to say, I want to be in your magazine, and here's why I think I need to be in your magazine. I think you want to look at my work because of X, Y, Z. And here's another thing what I mean with specificity. Every publication, every blog, every whatever, they have their focus. Reporters have their focus. So when you read a story or you see a publication that you think makes sense with your work, make a note of that reporter's name. Make a note of where and when you saw it so you can refer back to it when you write the reporter. If you give somebody enough, not even enough of a reason, but just the smallest reason for why you think it might work out, that you two would work together, they'll bite. They'll be interested in it. Okay, I've got more questions. Cover press releases, we will. How do I keep my contact list? Contact list. Okay. I'm going to move on to press releases now because I think this is really important to get to. It's one of the whole reasons for tonight. If I haven't answered your contact list question, send me another message. I keep my contact list. Well, one, I do almost everything through Facebook now, and texting. I text a lot. But I'm getting sick of that, so I'm making more phone calls. So I have everything is synced up on the Apple platform. Paul's probably rolling his eyes. He hates Apple. But I have my iPad and my iPhone and my iMac and my everything are all synced up together. So I enter them on one, it goes in the magic cloud in the sky, and then they're on all of them, right? So I have a database, but like everything, it just depends on your personality. If you want to keep an Excel spreadsheet, and I suggest this is totally fine too, that has name, publication, position, phone number, all that stuff, then that's totally fine. For people in Chicago, the Chicago area, there is a place, and I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. There's a place called the Community Media Workshop, and it sells lists. And I bought it for the first couple of years that I did publicity to get to know everybody. Because in that list, it's like for $100 or $150, it's totally worth it. It lists everything about their deadlines, how they like to receive press releases, because every publication is different, and where they want it sent to and what the deadline is, because all the deadlines are different too. So this is why I suggest small bites. Take it as you go. Make it your goal to add one reporter a week to your mailing list. That doesn't seem so bad, right? You read tons of articles and tons of publications, and you know tons of people, and all those people are reading tons of stuff. Make a note, like, you know, in a few months I'm thinking about doing a series on marine life. And then you're suddenly reading a bunch of stories about marine life, right? Or you're thinking about doing a story about, or doing a series of paintings about, like I said, the color red. And then there's plenty of reporters that write about that kind of stuff too. Break it down even further. So if you're doing a series of paintings about the color red, or that feature the color red, is it Pantone? Is it, what is it? What kind of red? And then who writes about that kind of stuff? If it's Pantone, I would go after reporters for digital publications, digital magazines, blogs, stuff like that. So it's not just a matter of like, who likes, I don't sit down and go, who wants to write about bugs? I sit down and say, how many different ways can I spin what I'm doing already into something interesting for people who would never write about me? Oh, press release, right. Hold on. Again, I'm going to go back to consistency for press releases. It's very, very, very important to build a relationship on trust. You're building personal relationships. You're building communication. Reporters that I've worked with 2 years ago, I'll give them a call once or twice a year just to say, hey, I read that story that you did. I really liked it. Hope you're doing well, and I'll see you around. That's it. It's maintaining relationships. Just like I would want to check in on any of you or anybody that I know peripherally who I want to keep a relationship with. You check in on them from time to time to see how they're doing, right? Do the same thing with reporters. Send them a note. They pay attention. They never get that kind of stuff. They just get a bunch of grief and aggravation. Their jobs are really hard. So, you know, it's like our jobs. We're alone most of the time, and then what do we get? Sometimes nothing. Sometimes a sellout show. It's the same with reporters. So send them, you know, hey, Steve Edwards from NPR, from WBZ, I really liked that report you did about whatever. When you're sitting down to write your press release, think about not just where it's going to go, but the fact that all those people, you're going to send them more stuff in the future. Ideally, you'll send them something a few times a year. Or maybe you'll just send them something once a year. Doesn't matter. If they can expect consistency and quality from you, no matter what it is, they know that all your T's are going to be crossed and your I's will be dotted, and that you're going to speak in a language that means something to them. They will most likely give you space in their publication. The more you can do their job for them without them realizing that you're doing their job, the more likely you are to get publicity. Ken, I'm reading yours. Ken says, so I can focus on the subjects I'm writing or working from, I guess. I'm working on a concept of expert on literal. Yes, you can. So I can become an expert on the literal and how it's actually a trope. Yes, exactly. Exactly. When someone gets up to give a speech, you automatically take them as the expert, right? You might question them later, but you give them the benefit of the doubt. We just do. It's human nature. Same thing with your press releases. Same thing with anything that's coming out of your studio. You tell people you're an expert, and you show them at the same exact time. And you show them by using consistent language. Ken, I've noticed already in your communications with me, you have a consistency in the way that you speak. Your press release was written in the way that you, not only that you speak, but that you write. And that is authentic, and that is good. Don't try to copy somebody on anything that you do. Don't try to put yourself into some other method. You can try other methods that work. I'm offering you tons of suggestions and anecdotes and ways that people have done things, but you need to find out what genuinely works for you. I've just been telling you what has more of a success rate, and specificity is a big one. Specific format for press releases? No. I have one that I believe works better than many others, but again, it's what you're comfortable with. And I feel like I'm being vague on this, despite my, I can't be vague, can I? I said specificity. I feel like this is a fight every time. Like people are like, yeah, but I could do it this way, or you could do it any way. You could write it on a basketball and send it to somebody, okay? You can do it any way you want, but there are ways that are better and ways that are less effective. I won't say worse and I won't say wrong, but there are ways that are less effective. The basketball thing probably won't work for but just like one person. So you want, think about how a newspaper is set up. Newspapers still publish that way for a reason. And many, many, many blogs and online newspapers also publish this way, okay? So you probably all know the standard formatting of, you know, contact and for immediate release and all that stuff. You do that. That's sort of like just the standard templating stuff. Then you want big headline, usually a one-deck headline, maybe two. That means lines, so like usually a one-line headline. Two, if you absolutely have to. Don't be wordy. Write them like headlines. Write them like news headlines. So you might have incorrect grammar sometimes in your headlines, but make them active. Avoid passive language. If you don't know what I mean by passive language, go get the Strunk and White Elements of Writing, Elements of Style. That's it. Read that book. you can read it in, on a train ride. Use the active voice, active verbs. Something's happening now, pay attention. That's the idea with a press release. This is important, this is happening now, pay attention to me. Now, because we're in a visual field, I'm a huge advocate of putting a picture into the press release. Lots of people argue about this back and forth, but, and here's another thing to Google if you don't know how, because I'm not going to spend time explaining it tonight. We don't have time. Turn it into a PDF. Turn it into a reduced file size PDF. Everyone can open PDF. Everyone can open them on all of their different laptops and iPads and whatever, and phones. I can open PDFs on my phone, but I can't open some other files. You want to make it so that the most people can have access to it right off the bat. And you want to make it really, really easy, which is why I say put in an image. Because I'm not going to go look it up, necessarily. It bugs the crap out of me. It bugs me really, really bad. And that's because I come from a different background. I don't come from an art background. Okay, I come from a reporting background. So it really bugs me in the art magazines that there's a huge page and somebody's name. Like, it works if it's Jasper Johns or somebody and somebody. But if it's a whole list of artists that aren't blue chip and we don't all know their names, and I don't really care about conceptual artists personally or in my studio practice, I'm not going to know their names. So if they just put the name, I don't look up the name. Do you look up the name? Maybe some of you do. But most reporters do not. And most of the people that you want to reach are not in those art publications. And those art publications seem really, really important. And for a feather in your cap, they are. But they're no more than that. There are statistics that show that, well, much publicity, and again, back to it not being a magic bullet, much publicity does not lead to sales. You will get more, if you view public relations as an ongoing interpersonal activity between all the people that you meet in your whole life, more holistic version of public relations, you will make sales that way. You will get people interested when you have an image. I find that the image that's used in publicity is usually the first one that sells. So there's that. But that also is not an automatic thing. Anyway, yeah, so that goes, and also goes back to you want to make sure that you're doing their job for them as much as possible. So you provide them with an image, and you need to learn to edit your own information. And this can be very, very hard. But if you're really looking at the publications you're interested in being in, and you shouldn't just carpet bomb places. Be specific. When I write a specific reporter and I say, hey, I read this story you did about whatever, and it was really interesting, and it got me thinking about this, and by the way, this is what I do, and here, would you like to come over for a studio visit? Or, you know, whatever. There's all sorts of ways to do it. Each publication has its own tone. Each writer has their own agenda, and it's really easy to figure out, too, after just reading a couple of stories. Chicago Tribune's very conservative. Well, they don't give any coverage to arts at all, either. They have a very Republican agenda as well. But the Sun-Times, they do. They give, and they're a paper of the people. I would rather have an article in the Sun-Times on one day, because more people will see that in one day and on that blog than in art news, than they would see it ever. Because there's that readership is actually dwindling. Despite the fact that there are more artists than ever, the readership of magazines like Art Forum has gone down like a ridiculous amount. And I was talking to a couple of their reporters not long ago from their former heyday, and they still sort of write now, and they're really angry and they're really curmudgeon-y And there's also sort of an insider's way to get into those publications. So my advice on that is pay attention to what they do, but don't make it your sole focus. It's just like having an exhibition. Get some smaller reviews, get some smaller hits, even if they're not reviews, even if they're just regurgitating your press release, which is totally fine. You can then put that on your resume and you start getting an awareness. You start building the brand there. Okay, no, I'm not saying to write different press releases for different publications. I'm saying to approach them differently. So you would write one press release, get really, really happy with that's the thing you want out into the world, and that's the thing that you're okay with a regular Joe publication, quote unquote, like the Sun-Times, picking up, and then a more specific art blog, for instance. So you're writing, you just want the most cohesive document that you can put out from your studio. You want it to get as happy as you possibly can with it in 1 to 2 pages, no more than 2 pages. Don't make it, you should get it down to 1 page, even with the image, and you can do it. I know you think like, oh, you can do it. If you want me to edit one of your first press releases, send it on over and I'll do it. I'll get it down to 1 page for you. I'll show you how. I have no problem helping you out like that. It helps us all if we're all sort of on the same page because there are no standards in this industry. Anyway, no, not different press releases for different publications, but different introduction letters for different reporters and for different publications. And not even for all of them. I had one really big hotshot client, and I sent out 179 press releases in 1 day. And that's because this artist is more of a generalist and a populist. So 179 press releases in a day. I sent them to specific home and gardens editors. I sent them to the arts editors. I sent them to the lifestyle editors. I sent them to the managing editors. Write all these editors down that I'm listing, by the way. Because in order at any publication, it goes like this, top down. Editor-in-chief, don't bother the editor-in-chief unless there's only the editor-in-chief and 1 reporter, right? But at a large enough publication of any kind, except a blog, except a single person blog, there's the editor-in-chief, the managing editor, and then a series of editors under the managing editor. Depending on the size of the publication, these things can differ. But if you go to a masthead, which is the listing of the editorial staff, and you look and you see a photo editor and an arts editor and a lifestyle editor, an entertainment editor, and all these other sub-editors underneath the managing editor, you want to send it to those sub-editors first. My other trick is I will also send it to an underling. I will send it to an intern. I will send it to a first-year reporter. I will send it to somebody who's eager to cut their teeth. Because here's what happens in a newsroom. Any newsroom, arts publication, doesn't matter. Arts publication sometimes, it's all the same. They have their staff meetings. I'm throwing tricks at you, so write this stuff down. They have their staff meetings generally on a Wednesday. Well, they have a series of meetings. They're budget meetings. Budget meetings mean that's what they are going to allocate for the next issue that they're meeting about. If it's a daily newspaper, they try to work 1 to 2 days ahead of time. So you can slide in pretty late, but they still prefer to get press releases 2 weeks ahead of time for the lifestyle sort of sections, because they work on those weeks ahead of time, and the news section is really the only one that comes in last. This applies to their blogs too. They have blog editors and photo editors for the website and all this stuff, right? So if your art is photography, heck, even if it's not your primary thing, but you take some really badass photos and you'd like them out in the world, send it to the photo editor. because they have to have standalone photos to fill space. It's a human interest kind of thing. If you think that for whatever reason it would look good in that publication, send it. And don't give up either. Do not give up. You're building a relationship. If somebody doesn't get back to you right away, for instance, I was supposed to have, my solo show was supposed to be in June, but I pushed it back to January now, 2013. And I had written Elizabeth Alfano months ago about the show in June. Never heard back from her. Didn't hear a thing. Thought for sure she was like, eh. She writes me out of the blue the other day and says, hey, don't you have a show coming up? So people pay attention even if they don't get back to you, especially reporters. They're busy. They don't necessarily have time, but it's on their agenda. They put it on the calendar. And if you give them enough lead time, if you really want to be on Alfano's show, or you really want to be on some radio show or whatever it is, whatever you've identified, like, man, I'd really like to be in that. You give them enough lead time, you follow up with them a couple of times, gently, they'll remember and they'll come back. And that's what I mean by, you know, have individual contact with the reporters. You don't necessarily have to write individual press releases. Victoria, reporters don't often copy and paste, but here's the thing. If they need to, they will ask you for the Word document. And that's my other advice. When you're writing, say, here's a PDF of this thing, but I've got Word document, or I've embedded it in, I've embedded it below in the body, whatever. But I can tell you this, when you get a big, giant, long email, think about your own habits. When you get a big, giant, long email, especially from somebody who's shilling something to you and you don't know them and there's not a lot of images, do you read it all the way? Because I don't at all. My mom sends me an email. If she doesn't, I had to teach her to put hard returns in it or I wasn't going to read it. And it's definitely that way with reporters, okay? They are skimming and they want the most information as quickly as possible. And especially the less editors and the less reporters a publication has, you're looking at more and more of a drain on resources. So you need to just be clear and concise up front. And that alone will rise you up in the ranks of how to get attention. Because most people are just like, really, the verbosity of people is astounding. They just talk and talk and talk and talk endlessly about themselves. Edit it down, cut it down. Make yourself small. It seems like, well, I don't want to do that, but that you have an opportunity to make yourself bigger later. You just need to get in the door, right? It's like your first show ever. I got in the door, hot damn. Now I can do something else. It's the same exact thing. Okay. Will a publication do an article on an artist without a big show coming up? Absolutely. And can you cover the 18-month PR plan? Okay, I'll sort of do those two things at once. People will give you coverage for anything that you give them a reason to do it for, okay? It's just also a matter of figuring out what publications work with you. Not every gallery is going to show your work, and that's totally fine. Don't go after the publications that you don't think your artwork will fit in. And if you're unsure, just ask some friends. Like, that's the easiest thing in the world, really. Like, can you think of any publication that might look at my work? Everybody knows a reporter, or a former reporter, or a blogger. Okay, so, will a publication do an article on artists without a big show coming up? Yes, but you still have to have a reason. So, there are lots of things that you could dangle in front of a publication. A collaboration, a lecture, an experiment. That's probably the least likely thing to get publicity if you're just doing an experiment with another artist. But you still consider it worthy of maybe doing a small press announcement. There's press releases, and then there are other just like little announcements that you can do that sort of indicate to reporters this is going on, it will probably lead to something bigger, just a heads up. Totally fine to give reporters a heads up. In fact, it's better. If you have a reason in your studio to contact the media a couple times a year, you're doing all right. If you kind of have to come up with talking points to have a reporter around, just in general. But I would, watch feature stories on artists. Google or YouTube your favorite musicians, your favorite artists. They have different talks. And I say musicians or playwrights or anything that you're interested in. And listen to the questions that they're being asked. Ask those questions of yourself. If you can answer those questions, then you can have a reporter in and see what's going on. Every newspaper, and certainly lots of blogs, they have to fill content almost every single day. That's a lot of stuff. So what's best when you don't have a big show is to try to get a human interest story. And that's when, Gina and others, you want to get into maybe the more personal stuff. I'm not saying this has to be some sort of bloodletting and like, I just happen to have a lot of emotional shit that I can drag up. You don't have to do that. That's just, I did it for a long time. It's no big deal. It's part of what I do. But there's other stuff that you can talk about. Like the frustrated architect thing, or Ken, you seem like you live in the middle of nowhere. Maybe I'm wrong, just from the few seconds I saw of you talking. Why do you live in the middle of nowhere? What, everybody has an origin story. Everybody has a reason they are where they are. And you can use that as a human interest piece. And people really love to highlight artists in their communities. I believe that. They really, really do. Gina, yes, I will in 1 second when I get done with the 18-month PR plan. So 18-month PR plan would be when you have a solo show. That's probably the biggest one. Or some other giant project that you want to release, okay? So, and this is how I work. Everybody works differently. But if you start now building your press contacts, even just one a week, think about how many you'll have in 18 months. That's a lot. And you keep those divided into different sections, right? So if you go and you paint the backdrop for a theater, you want to contact all your theater contacts. Not necessarily the art editors, but the people who do theater bloggers. I'm doing some fashion collaborations right now. I don't necessarily want to go after the art editors, although some of them, yes. But, and this is an 18-month project. So I'm going to be doing custom corsets with my drawings and a corset maker. We're having the fabric printed and all the stuff. And we're doing some sculptural elements. So right now we're thinking funding, and then I automatically go to publicity. How can we get publicity? Well, you can start with the very first piece for the big event. So if you, for instance, my show in January, this is 9 months, not 18, but I'm trying to get the centerpiece of the show done now because that's the one I want to push for a number of reasons. Because for all of these reasons I'm about to list, it's going to be the most elaborate, it's going to be the most expensive, it's going to be the biggest, and it's also going to be the biggest pain in the ass for me to make, so I need to get it done sooner so that I know that it's done for sure. But I'm already thinking about what publications and what crossover I can have. I didn't start this early enough. Shame on me. I should have decided to do it in January. Or I should have had it done in January, actually. But I don't. I'm behind. So what am I going to do? I'm going to exploit it as much as possible 3 months out instead of 6 months out. So I say 18 months is generally when you start thinking about, well, I'm going to have this solo show and I know this. So the first couple of months, you know, month 16 through 18, you start thinking, what is this show about? Or at least I do. And how is it going to change? What am I looking at here? What are my strengths and weaknesses? And if I have a bunch of strengths, how can I push those sooner rather than later? So that first 6 months of the 18-month plan should be developing the plan itself, like what sort of media attack you're going to do. Are you going to do a video? If you're having a solo show, I would highly suggest it. Also, another time to do a video is maybe every just a couple of months, a short one, under 3 minutes to keep people interested. The return on investment for videos, and I say that because I think you should hire someone to do it sometimes, especially if you have a solo show coming up. The return for what you can get to spend $100 or so to have somebody shoot some good high-def video of you and edit it together in a way that is not your own is good. Because if they're a professional editor, I'm talking about a professional here, not your cousin Joey, you know, hire somebody, pay them, somebody you've seen their video work, and then you can use that. Videos are really the pictures of right now. More people watch video than anything else. So if you can do one yourself that's short, sweet, interesting. What videos are you watching? What's inspiring you? Do something similar to that, or hire somebody. I actually traded with someone to do a professional video of my studio practice, and I'm going to do another one right before the show comes out. So, and that will show some of the pieces that will make people start to salivate, not only to see them, but potentially to buy them. And then when you start building your images, you use the same images over and over again. So the thing that makes people who are really branded very, very successful is that they have a consistency in quality and a consistency in image. And that's what I mean, getting back to the very beginning of this. You can experiment all you want, but if you are trying to build an actual following in something, focus on that thing. And the media definitely responds to that focus. And that's where I am tonight. You know, if we're talking about something else, if you wanted me to give a speech as an artist, I would say some other things. But I'm saying it as someone who has done radically successful publicity campaigns for a lot of people internationally now. I have one client in Germany. So, and we spent 2 months on her press release to announce that she was in residency at a place in at a place in Germany. So, yeah, 2 months to work out the language on a page-and-a-half press release. And there were a lot of reasons for that. You don't necessarily have to spend 2 months, but we were doing it, and we wanted to meet with a certain level of sophistication for an international audience. And then I did a different one for the US market, because the European market and the US market are totally different. You don't necessarily have to worry about those things yet, but in a few years, with really hammering home what you do, you'd be there. And you'd have those big art publications paying attention to you. If you notice the people who have solo shows and publicity over and over and over again, they're doing the same stuff, but they find how to do variations in degree of that same stuff. And Ken's probably cringing. I'm a poet too, Ken. So how do I bring my poetics into what I'm doing? How do I tell stories? And Ken, you seem like a storyteller. So how do you turn the most bizarre abstraction into a concrete story? Because if you can't, you won't get publicity. It's that simple. If it's obtuse language and verbose and people can't wrap their heads around it and it smacks too much of art speak, or even if it's art speak but it's inauthentic to what you're doing, because if you're trying to speak art speak to people who do it all the time, they can smell somebody who doesn't know how to do it. So be genuine to you, to what you're actually doing. Did I say to show the same images over and over again? I did, in fact, say that. You can put out all types of images on your news feed and your Facebook and stuff like that, but when it comes to publicity, you all probably have a very specific image in your mind of what I look like, right? It's that one picture where I'm looking over my shoulder, and right, that's my official bio picture. I have lots of other photos, but that's the one that is Lauren-Levato, right? There's a couple that I use out of my studio for right now. I'm doing tons of other stuff in here, but it's not released yet. So until I release it and until I have enough of a body of work behind it to release it, and that's just, this is me. I don't release stuff before it's ready to be birthed into the world. I use the same images over and over, even though those images are sold. I'm totally not going to go in any show or anything else. It doesn't matter. Those are that's my consistency and quality until I give you a new thing that is the new consistency and the new quality. So, but that's part of how branding works. Whole Foods uses the same thing over and over and over again. Ken, if you're into weird intellectual language, are you into it? And this is something you have to answer. Are you into it for the sake that it's weird, or you just like it because or you're just a poet that uses that type of language? If you use that language all the time, people won't suspect that it's false. Or at least if they do, they'll figure out quickly that it's not false.
Can you hear me now?
I can, yeah, there you are.
Okay. I didn't hear part of what you said because I had some trouble with the audio. But I've just been into language for a very long time, and have resisted the idea that intellectual language isn't figurative. But it's harder to locate. Do you feel like something that I wrote came off false already?
No, I don't. And my only suggestion to you for what you wrote for that, well, I have some suggestions, but nothing spoke to me as false. The first thing I wrote down was, what images are you going to use, and it's okay if they aren't yours. Because in a group show, so Ken has a group show in Kansas, right? Coming up, and he wanted to know how to best go about publicizing it. And I think, and this will help everyone edit, actually. Choosing the best image for a group show can be painful, especially if you're the curator or the guy doing the publicity, because it might not always be your image that needs to be used for the publicity. I've been in shows before where, of course, I always want my image to be used, but my image wasn't the best one to publicize the show. And what I mean by best is, what's the title of the show or the theme of the show, and which piece most accurately reflects that, so that there is some symbiosis, right? So that it makes sense that this image is being used. Or, and this I go with more often, what's the image that is going to reproduce the best graphically? What's the image that's going to get the most attention? Because if people have to spend, and again, unless you're in an art publication where people are expecting to encounter very strange, disjointed imagery from one page to the next, like that's what we all sign up for when we read an art brag, right? But if it's just a general publication, which there are more of, and that's why I keep focusing on them, if it's a general publication, then you might want an image that has more clarity in it. And by that I mean, if it's a color, if there's like 4 or 5 color field images that you want, which one's going to reproduce the best? If it's, or if you have, we're going to choose between a painting that has large objects in it, so that there's distinction between them, versus a drawing that is very like, and like lots of little tiny like scribbles and stuff. which don't reproduce very well. Okay, so like
I have to. I'm sorry. I want to bring this up. I think the sculpture of Bill McBride kind of anchors the show.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and I didn't get a chance to look at it.
So I guess it's a group show, and yet somehow that one sculptor is anchoring all the different spaces in this huge warehouse. And then you've got the paintings and photographs on the wall by the different 2D artists. But I don't know, you know, that's just kind of there in that's the subtext, I think, whether or not I want to amplify that. But I imagine sculpture also presents problems with having an image, you know, that you send out with a press release.
It can, unless it's been photographed in a specific way. And yeah, with the press release, I mean, you want the best photograph with the most uniform background, because if they're going to cut out the sculpture and drop it in someplace, like, and wrap the text around it, then it doesn't really matter. But again, it's just, you know, just think about when you've been at a job, or when you've been doing something you're really stressed out. That's how editors operate all the time. So they honestly don't take a lot of time with the work, even if it's an art publication and that's their job. There's not a lot of editors over at Art Forum. You know, there's only a couple. Yeah. So sculpture can be problematic. If it's shot really well, though, then it's just like any other image, you know. So I'm gonna mute you again. I mean, we've got a lot of questions. We can go a little bit over, guys. Somebody wanted me to give my elevator speech. But first, no, I do not copyright my images. I was a poet first, and I sort of came from the, I don't know, I just really bought into this idea that it's just sort of copyrighted when you do it, and I'm not to the level where anybody's going to make money off of me. If I'm worried about copyright issues before I'm worried about how to frame my work, then I think my priorities are backwards. I understand that it can be an issue for some, but seriously, if somebody's got the gumption to make a bunch of giclée prints or whatever of some of my work and make some money off of it, good for them. That's fine. I have other problems to worry about. If I'm the level of Damien Hirst, then maybe I'll worry about it. Maybe, I guess. I don't know. But that's not something that I am concerned with. I never really have been. I think, and I don't even sign my work on the front. I think I have I just don't. So that's a whole other issue, though. Artists are usually weird deviants. Okay, yes, okay. So I have recorded this, yes, and I'll send it to everybody. I wanted to send it to Gina, too, which is why I recorded it tonight. The question is, oh, my elevator speech. Yeah, well, it depends. I have a couple different things that I'll throw out there, but when people say, oh, you're an artist, and this is how it generally goes, right? Yeah, what do you do? Well, it depends on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to another artist who's maybe going to curate some shows, I still have an elevator speech. But if I'm talking to somebody who doesn't know me, which is when you should have this elevator speech down, I say, I'm a draftswoman. I work primarily in graphite, but also in colored pencil. I'm obsessed with insects, so I do everything from single insect illustrations to narrative multi-figure work that involves insects. And I realize that the insects, that's what seems to draw people in, but it's also being specific with things that they understand. Graphite pencils. You can say, even if you are the most abstract painter there is, you can reference something that everyone will know about. Be it, I do abstraction using old master techniques. What does that mean? Well, it could mean that you stretch your canvas and you do an oil prime and you do everything like the old masters did. Or, you know, I'm just throwing examples out there. There's any number of ways to get what you do down to a single sentence. And it sounds like you couldn't, but I'll help all of you do it. If you send me like your statement, I can get it down to something really, really, really specific. Because it's very hard when you're in your own. I have the advantage of having been an editor, but it's very hard when you're in your art space and doing that to edit those things out. I understand that. So if you think about it from an audience viewpoint or from a stranger's viewpoint, what would this stranger be interested in about me? It's hard to know that, but if you just throw some random thing out with some specific thing, then they can find a way in to ask you questions. And that's what you want. You want a call and response. You're calling out to the media. You want them to respond. And by giving them something, by giving them the 2 plus 2, specific, abstract, they can put those things together and come to you and say, let's talk about the number 4. Like, that probably sounds totally crazy, but if you're giving them 2 pieces of a puzzle and they can put that puzzle together. When I email a press release, what do I put in the subject line? Depends. If it's a solo show, usually some announcement about that. But I tend to write sort of poetically. Let me see how to say this. I tend to harness the power of poetry, like alliteration and things like that, to make it a subject line or a press release title that either sounds sing-songy, like the way Lauren-Levato does, la la la, or if you're known for something, like I can email somebody and say, Bug Lady's back. I did that last time. Won't be able to use that again to find something different. Is there something sexy in your show? Is there something provocative? Is there something? You just have to use active verbs. If the people don't know your name, don't lead with your name because it doesn't mean anything. Think about the small little section that people see in the subject line. So you want it to be something exciting and relevant. The title of your press release will work. And then just a colon, new paintings by Patricia, or new exhibition from, or group show from. It depends on I try to think the opposite of what people are going to be receiving. If it's a primarily arts-based publication, they're going to receive lots of new work by, solo show from, da-da-da-da-da. Like lots of that. The extent of the lack of imagination of people is astounding to me. So there's going to be lots of that. So if you want to break up your subject line with, like once we did, there was a press release that I sent out for a show called Nude. And so I led with the word nude everywhere, to find the thing that is different from what everybody else is going to send. And I can tell you that at an editor's box is just, can you imagine the stream of junk mail that you get? That's exactly what it looks like to an editor. So, and this gets back to somebody else's question about press releases, mail them or email. Most people prefer email now. However, there are a few select editors, and especially the ones that are more eccentric in what they cover and in what they write about and in the publications that they work for, they really want handmade packages. I heard this from a few of their mouths in the past 6 months. So maybe you send a little cutout from your journal, like something that you're not going to miss. but it's a hand-drawn little something, you know, or it's a, I don't know, draw a little alien, something, right? There's something cute to get their attention, but something meaningful, like whatever it is that you do in your various studio practices, something that relates, and clip it to your business card and send it to them in the mail in a card. It can't hurt. It doesn't hurt at all. And it's different than a press release. And then you can refer to the press release. And now here's the other thing. When you send a press release, I generally send them on Tuesdays. I've said this before, but Mondays are hell for everybody, right? Don't even bother. Tuesday morning through mid-afternoon, good time. Because everybody's dealt with their Monday shit. The staff meetings are not happening yet. And so you can kind of get them in a lull. Thursdays are okay too. Friday afternoon, forget it. Don't even bother. But what Friday afternoons are good for are leaving them voicemails, or because you'll get their voicemail, for the deadline coming the following week or in the following 2 weeks. I can't stress to you enough the importance of actually following up with phone calls now. And you will not always get them on the phone, but be ready in case they do answer. Practice. Just stand there and practice, like, you know, like you're in high school about to give a speech again. Just do it. You may feel silly, but you won't feel silly if that reporter picks up and you're ready for it. Hey, Steve, I was just calling to follow up on that press release I sent you on whatever day. I hope you saw it. It had the subject line, whatever the subject line was. Be prepared for them to not say anything either. Like they might, you know, just be ready. Maybe they'll say, oh, well, it was about elevator speech. You know, first, I have a solo show opening this month at whatever gallery, and it's about whatever it is, and I just thought that you might be interested in it, so I could resend it over if you want me to. Offer everything to them without throwing yourself at them, you know, in a professional manner. Because they're gatekeepers, but don't be afraid of them, and just be as savvy as you would with anything else. That right there will get their attention. Like as soon as you have somebody's voice, like then this person is real, right? People aren't real in email. It doesn't matter in text message and all that stuff. They're just not real, and we don't read it the same way. But if I have verbal contact with somebody, then I'm going to make more of an effort with them, right? Don't you feel the same way? Like if you had a problem somebody had a problem sending you money, or somebody had a problem, something, you talk to them on the phone, you're more invested in that person. It's the same exact thing. Do I actually follow up on all the press releases? I sure do. I do not. Whoa, you guys have got a lot of good questions. Okay, hold on. Let me go from the bottom up. Gina says, do you actually follow up on all the press releases you send out by phone? Yes, I do. If I'm being paid by a client and I send out 197 press releases, I follow up on at least 80 of them, because that's half of what my fee is for. Making that phone call that I just talked about, sometimes making it twice. Now, remember, I have a huge list, and it's a list that I paid for at the beginning, but now have cultivated on my own. And people have paid me $3,000 to get this list. So it's a good list. And I know when the deadlines are and all this stuff. So you could hire somebody to do that for you. No problem. You know, I need somebody to write my press release and to follow up on phone calls. That's 15 hours, maybe. So if you can afford 15 hours over the course of a couple of months before a show, hire somebody to do it. Big deal. No big deal at all. Train them how you want them to say it. And then they have to deal with a phone call, right? And then you don't have to have the sweaty palms. But I always have maybe 10 people that I really, 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 really want to know what's going on. If all those other, if I send out, for my solo show, I'll probably send out 100 releases. There'll be about 10 people that I really want to know what's going on. And those are the people that I will follow up with. And then I will bug Aaron Packer, where I'm having the show, to follow up with different people for different reasons. But if you're on your own and you're having your show by yourself, or you don't have a gallery behind you to do some things, then yeah, make those 10 phone calls. make them twice, and make sure you know when their deadline is so that that you can have their attention. And just keep it brief. Keep it really brief and really personal but professional. Who are the ones that want little handmade packages? There's one woman in particular. Oh, hold on, I'm going to unmute Paul. I don't know if you're still here, if you went to sleep. Paul, are you there?
Yep.
There's a woman, I can't remember her name. She gave a lecture at CAC, and she does the roving reviews. Like that's
I don't know. You stumped me. I could look it up.
Yeah, look it up real quick. She did a lecture at the Chicago Artist Coalition. She did the panel a few months ago. Okay, I muted Paul again. Would I approach a museum gallery the same way as a publication? Maybe. Maybe not, though. It really depends. Depends on what kind of you're trying to build a long-term relationship with both places, but the gallery and the museum, they have more of an investment in your work, and you have more of an investment in them. So yes and no. I would in the follow-up. For example, Aaron Packer, who I'm now represented by, he rejected me at first years ago. Sorry, Victoria, you hear this story again, or a couple people. But I've always wanted to show with Aaron. And a few years ago, he told me no, like 7 years ago, when I was doing assemblage work. He said, nice work, but it's not for me. I thought it was up his alley. I was close. He liked it, but it wasn't for him, and maybe it just wasn't for him at that time. Fast forward to the fall, I approached Aaron again with sales numbers behind me. So, and I also went back to school, and my work was entirely different, and I just saw that he had a show of highly realistic, figurative graphite work. So those three things made me go back to Aaron, and I pushed here's the exhibition and sales record I had since the last time I approached you. Do you want in on it? So I approached it as a business deal, and of course I said it more tactfully than that, but not much. If you know me, that's kind of how I talk. And I had worked with Aaron in the meantime. I'd done a couple sales events with him, so I got to know him. He knew me, knew my face, knew that I worked with other galleries, and knew that I did publicity, and so we had enough of a relationship. And when he knew that I was also going to bring a huge investment into the gallery. And then I told him when we had our meeting and we hashed out our verbal arrangement that I was interested in leveraging the gallery to get shows in Tokyo. So I let him know my agenda right off the bat. And then he has other agendas as well. So it's just about, keeping that communication open. You're not going to hear from a reporter what their agenda is. You're never going to hear that from a reporter if the reporter is worth anything. They have an agenda before they even come into your studio. So just present your best face all the time. And that's why I have this message of consistency so much. Because you want to become an expert in what you do. Even if what you do is abstract drawings of hedgerows or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Become the expert in that thing. Become, generate all your publicity from the point where the romantic self meets the reality. And then change by degrees in that. It's a good question. How do you stay current on people who bounce around a lot, especially if the email address is not listed? If the email address is not listed, they're just trying to avoid spam. Call the publication. Call every publication. If it's been a few months between times where you've sent something out, and again, only do this with the people that are really important. If you really want to get into whatever magazine, call that magazine. They have somebody who answers and say, I just want to update my mailing list, and I have so-and-so as the managing editor. Is that still the person that I should send it to, and is this still their email address? And that person who answers the phone will just give you the information you want. They're not gonna, they don't care while you're calling. So don't be afraid to call and verify your information. It's the best kind of research and reporting that you can do. And sending them something that has their name on it specifically and their name spelled correctly is a big step in the right direction. If you are in a group show, can you substitute your image for the one that advertises in the show email? Absolutely. Or you can add it in addition to. Because, for instance, you know, you've got, I believe very much in using one image over and over and over again for publicity because it creates a brand and consistency. But when it's generated out of your studio, then you want to use your image. That makes a lot of sense. So use your image, but keep that image in there too. Because that way, that person's gotten the press release probably twice, and they'll make the connection. They'll make that visual connection. And if you're doing it on Facebook, same thing. I suggest, what I think is actually the best way to do it, if there are group shows, is everybody make a photo album. Sorry, everybody make a photo album, and everybody contribute to it, and everybody tag the other person. You have to work that out ahead of time, though, with the group show, because like if somebody did it to me, I'd be pissed. But it's a technique. It's a way you can do it. It's just not a way that I personally, as an artist, would want to do it, unless I was in a show about bugs. I'm in a show about women in science coming up in July at a good venue, and I will accept tags from those other artists because it's a highly vetted show, and it's all about science, which is part of my shtick, the science. You BCC, yes, I BCC the PR out en masse, and I individually address. So, for instance, the client I was talking about earlier that I sent, I sent 197 releases out. Those 160 of those were BCC. And then when I get those bounce backs, then I call, because I do. My list is always in need of updating too, and I don't know who's the most recent person at the home and gardens section of the whatever tiny publication in Skokie. So I get the bounce back, then I'll call, then I spend the next day or two calling that publication. You're probably rolling your eyes like, oh my God, that sounds like a lot of work. Well, then you decide, do I care about this publication or not? And if I care, then I follow up over the course of the next week or two. And that's what I mean by looking at this holistically. You have to pay your gas bill every month. You have to attend to your list every month, right? And even if it's just calling the smaller publications and verifying that those people are still there, and that's the email that they still want to use, well, that's another way to stay in touch with them as well. Hi, this is Lauren calling from Lauren-Levato studio. I just wanted to double check that Ellen is still the editor at whatever. Oh, no, we replaced it with so-and-so. And that's also a good way to become friends with the people at the front desk. And here's my other little secret, having worked at so many publications. You want to become friends with the people who seem to not have an important job. People who seem to not have an important job are generally hungry, or they're going to really, really favor a person who is nice to them, because there's not a lot of thanks in these jobs, especially if you're answering the phone at a giant publication. You get totally shit on. So, you know, everybody's busy, but the small bit of nicety in your day, you remember. A bounce back from a museum curator, and when I called, they wouldn't give me her correct email address. She had said that she was interested in my work. Okay, did you tell them that? Do some university system networks block if you send a bunch of emails to people at the university at the same time? Quite possibly. So I would maybe do no more than 5 at a time. And if you have to just go back into your sent mail and hit forward and then delete the forward, drop them in, you know, it'll take 30 minutes. But if you have to do that 10 times, then just do that. Victoria, I would call that museum back and just ask for the curator. Okay, well, some people, I can understand why they might not give it to you at a museum. I'm talking about publications, but I can understand why they would be, which museum was this? I can understand why they would be, why they would guard their staff. Oh, the MCA, of course, yeah. They never give it out to anybody. I don't know who it was. Message me later. I can get it for you. They will never give that out to anybody at the front desk because they've been ordered not to very, very, very specifically. But there are ways to get the MCA people's emails. And they're also on Facebook, too. And that's not the, I wouldn't send a pitch or anything to them through Facebook, but it's a way to stay connected with them. And you start posting enough stuff that relates to them, and suddenly they'll be commenting on your wall, which happened to me the other day. So, you know, I had a whole day where I posted, or 2 days, where I posted a lot of art articles and a lot of questions about them, especially about Art Speak. Like, especially the one, if you all want to go to my page and check it out. Oh, Trisha's hard to get a hold of, yeah, okay. Where they, it was in the CAW group too, Be Young, Post-Black, and From Chicago. I didn't know what the hell post-black was, right? So I wanted to have a conversation about it. So I just laid my ignorance out there, like, what the hell is post-black? And is Theaster Gates really doing post-black work? Like, what is going on? And one of the MCA curators and a journalist actually chimed in, and we had a very interesting discussion about it. I don't have anything to do with post-black work. I didn't know what the hell it was, but I really, really wanted to find out, and I really wanted to know stuff about it. So yeah, it's a good place to become friends with people, and you can develop a level of trust there when you're friends with somebody on Facebook long enough, and they see that you only post stuff related to you. They're not, you know, then you can approach them in a different way. Ken, what's up, Ken?
You asked earlier, or said something about being a storyteller, you know, how you write a story. And one thing I learned in playwriting is that you ask questions, and that generates suspense throughout the play. The audience wants to know the next thing, the next answer to the next question, or the previous question. And so that kind of, that idea came back to me when you mentioned that you had asked a question on Facebook.
Well, it's also yeah, it's very, very true, and it's also a marketing trick. Who wants a piece of candy? I do. You know, like it's one of the oldest marketing tricks of, you know, have you ever wondered why, you know, Clorox works so well, you know? And then you're like, no, why does it work so well? They make you ask a question that you don't even give a shit about, right? Yeah. I mean, I really cared about post-black and all that stuff. I really, really wanted to know, but it's the same sort of thing, and you can leverage that. Think of all the great storytelling devices that you have experienced in going to theater or in reading a book or in whatever. Use those art forms to your advantage. Use them in your own studio practice. Take a look around, and this is what I mean, again, about holistic. And this is what I really want you guys to walk away with tonight. And I think we're going to wrap it up in the next 10 here. That how do you look at everything that's going on around you and maximize the things that relate the most to you? Not everything relates to you. Not everything is going to work for you or with you, and that's fine. It shouldn't. You'll have more success with, like that article says, scarcity. People go to where the scarcity is, you know. When everybody's posting the same bullshit image on Facebook, you sign off for the day. Nobody cares. But when it's a news feed day where there's tons of interesting stuff, then everybody's engaged and everybody's having a happy day, right? It's the same in the news. So, and it's a little microcosm. And if you can sit back and observe Facebook, observe stories that are trending, which is why I said go to Reddit, R-E-D-D-I-T. Reddit has become known as, quote, the front page of the internet. You can watch things trend in real time, and you will start to see patterns. Because even in our, you know, new media age that we're in, there are still patterns. And there are patterns to storytelling, and there are patterns in your studio. And all of these things can be used, they're just leverage to work you into whatever arena is on your agenda. Okay, I think maybe one more question. Somebody I haven't heard from maybe. Paul, did you find that woman's name?
Nope, I didn't.
Okay, I'll find it and send it to everybody. Oh, the last thing that I will say is, oh wait, I see some questions. Many reporters write for multiple publications. So just because you read it in one publication doesn't mean that they're not out there other places. And there are a lot of cities. Don't just think about the city that you live in, but think about other places where you're exhibiting. Lots of places have coalitions of art reporters. And I'll send you guys some names. I'll send you guys some names, and here's your job for me. If you don't get it from me in the next 3 days, follow up with me because I can get busy too. So if you don't have follow up from me, ask me for it, and don't be afraid to do it. Okay, Victoria and Karen, I know you will do it. What are some of the questions you should ask yourselves? That's a very, very, very good question. Why am I doing what I'm doing? That's first. And I don't, like, keep in mind, I hate art school. I hate art school. I hate crits and all that kind of stuff. I think it's bullshit. I don't think art is created by committee. I think that ideas can be generated by community, and I think community can help you in your ideas. And I think a few trusted people can really, really help you in your studio, but I don't agree by art by committee. So what you're making, it should be very, very unique to you. And that is possible. I work in a deep, deep tradition of realism and figuration. The amount of historical baggage that comes along with me is legion. If I say those words to people, especially to art people. There was, find me on Facebook, a huge fight the other day. Huge fight. I posted a picture, and this guy who comes from Cal Arts attacked me, and we fought for 2 hours. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I digress. So why are you doing what you're doing? And what's the impetus behind it? And I don't mean to ask those questions in a way that like you should change or something, but find the answers to what you're doing. Find the genesis point. Well, gosh, I'm really interested in, I'm going to use you, Gina, because we talk so much. So I'm pissed off or a failed or whatever you want to call yourself architect, which is harsh language to use against yourself, by the way. I mean, I don't know your individual story, but so I have this architecture history that I'm not happy with. I have a reporter's history that I'm not happy with, you know. I got fired when the whole place fell apart and had to do a bunch of stuff, but I turned it into something good. So how did I get to this point? and not only how did I get there, but why? Like, what are the individual components? It seems like a lot of work, but if you just sort of ask that question and go to sleep a couple nights a week, you will start coming up with interesting answers, and you can maximize that information. How did I get where I am? Who am I looking at? What artists am I similar to? Where do I think I'm going? That where am I going is especially important for the 18-month plan. 18-month PR plan. What books am I reading and why? It sounds like a lot of self-analysis, but it is, because reporters are going to come to you with questions before they, and you want to lure them in with answers that they haven't even asked yet. So fine, like what is interesting about you? There's a whole ton of stuff that's interesting about you, and I mean you, like your studio practice and you, because there are two things there. There's the product, there's the artwork, and then there's the artist. So immediately you have two things to lure the media into your world with. Maybe sometimes the artist is more interesting, and maybe sometimes the art is more interesting. So being able to stand back and figure out when is and isn't is a skill. It's important, and sometimes it's really hard to do, and that's when you need a few trusted people. I'll think of more questions and send them to you guys. Ken said he would appreciate it if everyone in this class group emailed him with their website, bio, statement, whatever, to continue this discussion. And yeah, and I think that's a great idea. And don't, like, follow up with me too. I'm sort of fading, but there's still, like, I think I could probably do a 3-week seminar on this stuff. There's lots to think about. And I think about it in a very big picture, huge picture. It's much bigger than just write press release, send out, make phone call. And that's really exciting to me. It might be scary to you, so if it is, let me help you manage those fears, because I get really excited about it. So if you're, I hope you're excited too. I hope you're walking away tonight excited. If you're walking away tonight terrified, then definitely follow up with me, and we can have a discussion, and you know, I can give you guys all a little one-on-one time in the coming weeks. Not this weekend, I'm super busy. But yeah, I've introduced a lot of stuff here, and I think I abandoned my notes at some point, so I can even send those out to you guys, and if you can make heads or tails of them, figure it out. And again, pressure me to give you follow-up on this stuff. It might take me a week, but I'll get there, because I got a really busy next few days. I really appreciate everybody coming tonight and spending so much time here and giving. I know you all have very, very, very different concerns and very different studio practices, and you're all in very different places, but I really believe that everything that I said tonight applies to you no matter where you are, because you're gonna, it's cyclical, like everything in our studios, like everything in our lives. Sometimes you'll get a lot of publicity, and other times you'll get none, but still keep doing it. It's still a holistic, get into the holistic practice of doing it, just like cleaning your brushes, sharpening your pencils, and finding source material and keeping yourself interested. It's the same sort of thing. Okay, so I think with that.
Lauren, you are incredible. You make it so easy.
I know I covered a lot of ground. I hope it was okay for everybody.
Thank you. Sorry if I'm a hog.
Artist, but you're a PR artist too. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome so much. Thanks, Paul, for hosting the special seminar.
To Lauren, thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks,
Lauren.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.